Good morning. It's Tuesday, July 1st, 2014. This is Tech Talk Today, episode 18. My name is Chris, and happy Canada Day to our friends to the north. I hope you enjoy it. Why don't we start off with some headlines today, because there's a lot of things going on, and our chat room has already been buzzing about a couple of the big stories this morning. People are upset. Microsoft's really stepped in it this morning. But before we get to that, there's a story that started circulating a couple of days ago that I kind of sat on. I didn't run it because it seemed alarmist. And I was like, okay, let's wait for the rebuttal. But I actually haven't seen a very coherent rebuttal. The headline reads as this: Netflix could be classified as a cybersecurity threat under new CISPA rules. This is coming out of Vice. Now, Vice's motherboard site, they're pretty good, and they've got pretty good coverage. So I was like, okay, well, that kind of adds some legitimacy to it right there. But here's the details. This is the new CISPA cybersecurity bill. This is the one that allows tech companies to share information with intelligence agencies. And it's classified right now as so broad that ISPs might label Netflix as a cyber threat. The reason for that is a threat, according to the bill, is anything that makes information unavailable or less available. So, high bandwidth uses of some types of information make other types of information that go along the same pipes less available. This is Greg Nomge. He's a lawyer at the Center of Democracy and Technology. He was telling Vice that a company could, as a cybersecurity countermeasure, slow down Netflix in order to make other data gathering or other data going across its pipes more available to its users. Of course, this obviously has caused some uproar, and this uproar surrounding this bill has led to the postponement of its markup. It was originally set to be discussed by Dianne Feinstein's Intelligence Committee last week, but it was pushed back. No word on when it will be taken up by the committee, but considering that the bill has been in the works behind closed doors for several months, don't expect it to die without a fight and getting some serious consideration on Capitol Hill. This seems to me like an attempt to scream the sky is falling. Let's take something that everybody on the internet loves, Netflix and cats, and let's claim that one of them is going to be threatened by this new bill. And I would be willing to bet that this new bill is a bad thing. If it's like the old bill, essentially it indemnifies any provider from sharing your personal or private information with the government for cybersecurity purposes. It's pretty broad language, and it can cover a lot of things. And now this new addition to it means if something's degrading performance, perhaps like your BitTorrent download, or maybe just your Usenet download, because you can get rocking on Usenet, right? I mean, seriously though, that's essentially what this bill is saying. And perhaps what this is an attempt to get everybody excited and riled up by using something that just sort of grabs everyone's attention. But I don't know. Popey, I kind of would like to get your perspective on this, because you're outside the U.S., and I know Netflix isn't quite as big of a deal outside the U.S. When you see the headlines like this, when you see stories like this, does this seem like the sky is falling type things, or does this sound like a serious issue to you?
Yeah, it does. It seems like an orchestrated argument to make the argument why Netflix should be restricted and why net neutrality is a bad thing to me.
You think it's like a reverse logic, kind of like, here's a demonstration of how Netflix is putting undue stress on the net?
Yeah. It gives you an excuse to say, well, we should rate limit that, because it's, think of all the security emails, or think of all the, very important data that needs to be traversing the network. Your online banking that you're trying to do, you can't do online banking because that Git next door is watching a video. We should limit what he does. Or I'll tell you what, how about we let you pay a little bit extra so that you get online banking, and downplay the Netflix because you don't use that. And use that. They'll use this as an argument for rate limiting specific applications on the net.
It also seems like a backdoor way to go after pirates, right? I mean, because it seems like a great way to say that well, we don't know what you're doing. We're not going to. It's because part of the problem is, like, if I'm downloading over Usenet and it's fully encrypted, they have no idea what I'm actually transferring, but they can make some assumptions. Or if I'm downloading on BitTorrent, it's very hard to totally track all of that, except for the most popular of the torrents. So instead, what they could do is just say, well, across the board, if we just see a lot of this type of traffic, we'll just assume that they're pirating, and we'll just say, hey, that's too much traffic, you're degrading the network, and for cybersecurity reasons, we have to tamp that down. So it has a really kind of nice side benefit there.
I'm not so sure they can't figure out what you're doing. Okay, you can say I'm doing SSL encrypted traffic to the Usenet server, but they're not stupid. They know what NetBlock Giganews is on.
But now they don't have to. Now they don't have to bother. They can just say, oh, sorry, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're just doing too much of it. And in the name of cybersecurity.
My thought on it was, it just sounds like another excuse to not to update the network infrastructure and just blame people or blame companies for how the existing infrastructure that isn't keeping up is not being able to handle what they want to do with it.
Yeah, that's really, oh man, you just really touched on a nerve for me, because that is the subtext of so much of this stuff, is that these guys who make so much money and have had so much subsidies from the government, from our tax dollars right here in the U.S., they at the end of the day, the core problem is they don't want to invest further in that infrastructure. They want to milk it for as long as possible because they want to get those revenues up. And you can't blame them because they are companies. But at the same time, you have a responsibility as that particular type of product to continually invest in your infrastructure, because that's what makes it a viable product. It's very frustrating, man. Yeah, that's a good point. And so I think it's all of the above in this case. So we'll have a link to the Vice story if you guys want to read more. It's something we'll keep an eye on and see if I catch any rebuttals posted online. I'll talk about that too. But I got to move on to this next story because the chat room is fired up today about this, and so is the subreddit. This is impacting Jupiter Broadcasting audience members right now. So Microsoft has caused millions of Dynamic DNS users to suffer an outage as they have seized no IPs domains. Now, you guys might not be familiar with this, but Microsoft has an incredibly active and robust cybersecurity division where they actually work with law enforcement, and they do raids, like SWAT raids. Microsoft does. You can find videos of it now. There's law enforcement officials that are there with them, or sometimes it's weird. It's like a representative or something like that. But Microsoft it literally conducts raids of different types. I don't know about this one so much, but here's what I do know. Millions of legitimate servers that rely on dynamic domain name services from no IP suffered outages yesterday as Microsoft seized 22 domain names it said were being abused in malware-related crimes against Windows users. Now, that is a hell of a type of malware protection right there. Microsoft enforced a federal court order making the company the domain IP resolver for the no IP domains. Microsoft said the objective of the seizure was to identify and reroute traffic associated with two malware families that abused no IP services. Almost immediately, end users, some of which were actively involved in internet security, considered the move as heavy-handed, since there was no evidence that no IP actually officially sanctioned or was actively facilitating these malware campaigns. So this is, I think, a kind of an important aspect when you consider the level of outage here. In a complaint Microsoft filed on June 19th, Microsoft's attorney said that no IP is functioning as a major hub of 245 different types of malware circulating on the internet. Direct quote from the lawyer's filing. The document said the abuses of the services have been subject of recent blog posts by both OpenDNS and Cisco Systems, citing those as evidence. Monday's seizure was the 10th major malware disruption Microsoft has participated in. The actions typically combine surprise technical and legal procedures that eradicate or significantly disrupt major botnets. Those include, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, working with the banks to cut off funding, to shut down the payment processing. Not necessarily a bad thing if they're doing illegal activities, but interesting that it is a private company that's working with the banks to shut down the payment processing for theoretically another company or some operation. Go ahead.
So these are, botnets that are running on compromised machines in homes and offices around the country.
Right.
And those are at endpoints which are IP addresses that resolve to, home DSL connections like Comcast and Verizon Fios. Why don't they just appropriate the Comcast and the Fios DNS and repoint all of that to them? Because it's the same thing.
It is.
It's just a host name that points to an IP on the internet.
Except for no IP wasn't big enough to fight back. Comcast is too big.
Well, yeah.
That's really what it came down to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's depressing. I mean, at this point, I would throw in my my 2p and say everybody switch to afraid.org, because that's the one I use, and I'm lucky enough to use one that wasn't appropriated by Microsoft.
Oh, so the chat room points out, this could be a big differentiator, is because the end machines could be involuntarily or unknowingly participating. They are considered unattended, and so perhaps maybe that's why they can't do it that way. What I want to know is, isn't there just a way to do this without disrupting the legitimate users of a service? And when you do something like this, isn't that sort of setting a precedent that all these types of services, A, it's okay to do this with, and B, they're affiliated with shady activity? And that's what really concerns me, because there's lots and lots and lots and lots of legitimate uses for these types of dynamic DNS services. I use them.
Right, and I'd use them as well. I use it to connect to my mum's machine, because I don't know what IP address it's on. So
right.
I too am impacted by these kind of things. But it's frightening that they can just appropriate these online services in the name of security without telling the company that they're doing it. They're taking away their livelihood, their service.
Yeah, Pan 1414. In the Linux Action Show subreddit said, this is probably pretty relevant to anybody using a Raspberry Pi for a server. My personal mum server can no longer be reached because I have a dynamic IP and I was using a .biz from no IP to access my Pi. And, responds, yep, I can no longer use my .biz for my XMPP server, which means he can't communicate with the folks that are on there. There's several people in our own community that have been impacted by this. I guess people on our NetSec on Reddit are suggesting duckdns.org. What was the one you recommended, Popey?
Afraid.org.
Afraid.org is another one. So there you go. Sorry to everybody who's, this kind of stuff, it really sucks. And, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Microsoft. Jeez Louise. This next story, I just wanted to lighten things up. Speaking of Microsoft screwing stuff up, I've seen a lot of different places report this. I'm looking for more information, so I'll probably try to find it before we cover it last. But if nothing else, this is a hoot. South Korea has given up on Microsoft. According to the government in the statement, South Korea wants to break from Microsoft's dependency and move to open source software by 2020. In a statement, the government said that it will invigorate open source software in order to solve a problem of dependency on certain software. The government's already invested in Windows 7 to replace Windows XP, but basically they don't want to go through that again. And so they say in 2020, we're not going to the next Windows. We just want to move to something and just stay there. And so we're going to go to Linux when Windows 7 is end of life. And so they're going to use that time to sort of seed the open source community to build some of the things that they need. Pretty smart approach. The places I've seen reporting on it are kind of funky, like SoftP and a few others. No offense, guys. But it seems legit. I think it's pretty funny and maybe a sign of things to come. I think it's a really good idea, is use this time with Windows 7 that you've got. Use this time to stoke the development of the open source community to solve the problem you have. And it will save you so much money in the long term. Even if you have to pay these people, even if you have to do some bounty sources or something like that, in the long run, you're going to save so much money on licensing that it'll easily pay for itself. So I thought South Korea is doing it right. Just a quick follow-up on the Facebook story. We won't spend too much time on this. Remember how Facebook's defense was, well, what's the matter, man? It's in our terms of service that we could manipulate your emotions to see how it affects you in your life and what you post. What's the matter? Actually, turns out they didn't actually add that to the terms of service until 4 months after the emotion manipulation study was conducted. 4 months after the study. Which, if you aren't familiar with, we covered the other day, the study came to light recently when two co-researchers from Cornell University and the University of California published their new study describing how users' moods were changed on Facebook when Facebook manipulated the content, either being downer stuff or positive stuff. So Facebook really stepped in this. I suspect we might start to see class action lawsuits now, which will be entertaining to watch.
What, from relatives of depressed individuals who believe that they were depressed because they didn't see the kittens from their friends' posts?
Yeah, I think so. And because it wasn't in the terms of services until after the research was conducted, which demonstrates that they recognized there needed to be consent, right? So. Right,
yeah, and everyone reads the Facebook terms of service.
Yeah.
Well, the problem you run into is, how do you prove that you actually were included in that study, without
Right.
Facebook actually letting you know. So yes, potentially there's a group of people who could um make a class action lawsuit, but
There'd have to be some
those
sort of
people
discovery
don't
first.
know that they're they
Surely they
don't
could-
know that they were there.
They could do a freedom of information. I guess you have those
I
over
think
there.
that only works with the government,
Yeah.
not with Facebook.
You know, you'd have to sue Facebook to get them to release the information, and then once they release the information, you could base the lawsuit on the information that was released, and then those people could
Right.
group together. Maybe I don't know, or maybe nothing will happen because it is so damn complicated. Because can you imagine having to get lawyers to figure out how this works from a technical perspective? That right there is a huge hurdle. So maybe nothing will happen.
This is what should happen is maybe not a class action lawsuit, just to extract as much money as possible out of Facebook.
Yeah.
Because even if you do, it's not going to hurt them much.
No, they could just buy one less WhatsApp and they'd be all right.
Yeah,
I'm not
what should happen? Some kind of a consumer advocate company should go after them and just tell them to clean things up, and then
I'm
threaten
not entirely
lawsuit.
convinced this is a bad thing. Why should they not be able to do that when other companies do that regularly anyway?
Thank you for I was thinking yesterday about this after the show, and I thought, well, how is it different than a Las Vegas casino that paints blue sky and clouds and has daylighting effects, so that way you feel like it's daytime all day long and you stay up and gamble later than you would maybe instinctively stay up?
Or a supermarket that rearranges the aisles in order to move the sugar around in order to get you to see new products, or sprays the odor of freshly baking bread in the bread area to get you to buy bread. I mean, these are all designed to manipulate you.
Right.
And also the fact that they track what you buy using loyalty cards. I know there are a lot of advocates in the Linux community who won't have loyalty cards, pay for everything with cash, and wear reflective headbands so that you can't be seen on CCTV. But your average consumer, the kind of people who would go into a class action lawsuit against Facebook, are the same people who collect coupons and and would go to their local supermarket, and the local supermarket knows everything they've ever bought.
Right.
It's and manipulates them in exactly the same way. I'm not convinced this is as big of a deal as some lawyer somewhere thinks it is.
Right. I was thinking about that too, and I can see the case there, because you could almost apply this philosophy to any company that does something to manipulate its customer base's emotions. I mean, I think Apple tries to do that. They just released like some new ad called Parenthood or something like or Parents or something like that. It's obviously to emotionally engage you. And Microsoft did the same thing. Google demonstrated how Android apps are helping children, several times in Google I/O. It's the same kind of thing. It's just that Facebook is doing it in sort of a way that feels more devious, where when these companies are doing it, it's a part of a presentation. It's part of a projected image. It's all of those things. But when Facebook's doing it, it's like they're sneakily manipulating you at a more fundamental level. And let's bear in mind, the way they're manipulating you is by displaying you either good or bad things of your close friends and family. So for some people, that could have a lot more of an emotional strain based on what they're showing.
Right. It's computer-based voodoo magic that that does stuff that we don't understand, therefore it's bad.
Right.
Whereas when I went into Buffalo Wild Wings in Florida recently, and this guy came up and wanted to make a balloon animal next to my table, and I have a real hatred of balloon animals. He didn't understand how much that was emotionally damaging me. Right. I should sue that guy.
Right. You should. Yes. So there you go. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, audience. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and click the contact link and choose Tech Talk Today from the drop-down, or go to techtalktoday.reddit.com. Hey, real quick, before we move on to the remainder of the show, I just wanted to thank all of our 205 patrons over at patreon.com/today. This is where we are funding the future of the Jupiter Broadcasting Network via our audience. There's a lot of ways to grow a business, and this is going to be, I think, one of the most critical ways that we're going to fund future projects and endeavors of the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, and just help keep things rolling, hire staff when we need them, contractors and things like that. There's a lot of things we want to do, and we have different milestones laid out there. We're on our path to the next milestone. That's really the point where I'm going to be like, okay, I have enough reoccurring monthly revenue to commit to certain people a certain amount of money to do the things that we need done. I'm really looking forward to that next milestone. You can help us reach it by going to patreon.com/today. And when we do, I hope we get to it while it's really nice out, because I want to do a little barbecue celebration. And if the timing works out, there could be some barbecue-related swag involved. I know it's crazy. It's crazy. You can find out more about the swag, too, over at patreon.com/today. There is some limited swag club slots available. And when you join that pledge level, you're committing to investing in the Jupiter Broadcasting Network every single month. And you know that when you're watching our shows, when you're listening to our content, part of the reasons those are on the air is because of your support. Patreon.com/today. And thanks to everybody who supports the show. All right. So since Popey's here, we got to talk really quickly about Bitcoin, because I know he loves it. It's his favorite topic. All right, Popey, tell me if this doesn't change your mind today. Newegg announces they are accepting Bitcoin for payment of Newegg products. What do you think?
Well, that changes everything.
Come on, that gives it some legitimacy, right? Now you're thinking, oh, now people can buy actual things. Newegg tweeted this morning, we're proud to announce our acceptance of Bitcoin using BitPay. And they posted an obligatory GIF of Fry saying, take all of my Bitcoin. Also, 1-800-Flowers.com has announced they'll be accepting Bitcoin for their flowers, their popcorn factory, their baskets, their FannieMae.com, their fruitbouquets.com, and their stockyards.com. So it's a good day for Bitcoin today.
These are good news stories. I like Bitcoin good news stories. I don't really care about bad news stories. I like hearing about these goods and services that are in the real world, legitimate things that I could buy. If I know I can spend, like, I don't know, $6,000 on a mining rig, mine myself 1 Bitcoin, and then buy some flowers from my wife to make up for the fact that I just spent $3,000 on a PC, right, then yeah, I'm all for that.
Well, Bitcoin is up quite a bit on the news. Big jumps, almost hitting $660 and $670, depending on where you look at it. It's interesting. I think the Newegg one is a bigger deal. I'm still curious to see if Bitcoin users are willing to spend something that could go up a lot in value. Because right now, look, so 1 Bitcoin, you could get yourself basically the nicest video card on Newegg for 1 Bitcoin. But in a month, that Bitcoin could be $800, right? And then you could have bought maybe 2 video cards. Or transversely, it could also be worth $200, and then you got a screaming deal on that video card. See, I think your average
Bitcoin aficionado is savvy enough to twig that the value of Bitcoins may go down as well as up.
I agree. I just wonder if in a time when the Bitcoin price is pretty steadily climbing again, if you would think people would hoard, but actually data has shown that when the price of Bitcoin goes up, people feel rich, so they spend. So we'll see. Be curious. See what happens. All right. Well, hey, before we get out of here, I had like a tech time machine story I wanted to do. That Tom Merritt, not only is he a dapper fellow, but he's got like a tech history website, and I was just on there this morning looking at today. And this, I really felt like, wow, this really kind of puts everything in perspective, because we talk about like smartphones and all of this, like it's just almost getting a little blasé in some sense. 23 years ago today, 1991, the Finnish Prime Minister made the world's first GSM phone call over a privately operated network. The Prime Minister used Nokia gear on the GSM's original 900 megahertz band. That was just 23 years ago that the first GSM phone call was made. That means GSM is barely legal to drink in the U.S. Barely legal to drink. That puts all the whole smartphone industry in perspective a little bit when you think, yeah, the last 7 or 8 years have been crazy, but it's all just, hey, look how fast it's accelerated too. There's that long tail where it built up as a technology over 20 years, or really over the first 15 years, and then the last, boom, it's been so compressed, it's moved so fast. It makes you, sometimes it could stress you out a little bit. That'd be okay, I'd understand. If you put on a few pounds, it is, after all, Canada Day, and 4th of July in the U.S. is coming up. We might want to slim down a little bit. Well, guess what? Our special advertiser on Tech Talk Today has got a solution for you. So I'm going to play today's classic commercial. Thank you for joining me today on Tech Talk Today. I'm actually going to be out, so I won't be live tomorrow, but we do have episodes in the can that we will be releasing, so stay tuned to the feed. Don't forget you can subscribe to the feed. And by the way, a really big thank you to everybody who's been commenting and rating on iTunes. I know that's not so a very comfortable thing for all of you to do out there, but you guys rocked the iTunes top spot in the technology feed for the entire week last week. You had Tech Talk Today in the What's Hot and New in the front page of the technology section for the whole week. You guys rocked it. And if you still haven't commented or rated and you want to help, you might be able to help juice us back up there by going into iTunes, finding the Tech Talk Today feed, and leaving a comment or rating. I know, not everybody likes iTunes. I totally understand. But if you have access to it, you do help other people find our show, because like iTunes is like the podcast platform. People find stuff because, everybody's got these devices and they sync it up with iTunes, and even not even iPhone users, it's Android users, it's everybody. So it really does help because it's a massive resource for podcasters. So, and thank you everybody who has. I mean, even just being up there for a solid week was awesome. I mean, I was like, wow, the audience really rocks. So now as a thank you, I'll give you a pro tip on how you can slim down with today's sponsor.
What's the best way to reduce? Eat what you want or starve yourself? Starve yourself? Wrong. A half-empty stomach causes hunger tantrums. Now you can avoid hunger tantrums, lose weight naturally and fast. With the RDX full stomach reducing plan, you fill your stomach, yet fat just seems to melt away. And safe, pleasant-tasting RDX tablets contain no dangerous drugs, no hormones. So if you want to eat and lose fat, get RDX at your drugstore today.